Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award. To begin today, we'd like to start with a prayer from Father Matt Malone. Welcome on.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Almighty and eternal God of love and mercy, we ask you to send your Spirit upon us to bless and hallow our gathering. Open our hearts that we may grow in love of you and of one another. Infuse our minds with the ways of wisdom and guide our feet in the ways of peace. We ask your blessing upon the honorees here today. We ask your blessing upon the friends and family of Robert F. Kennedy. We ask your blessing for our country, for its healing, for its reconciliation. And we ask all of this in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Matt. We have a surprise guest who is somebody who we've been working with since the early 1980s on human rights throughout the world, but especially in Central America. And it's so wonderful to have Congressman McGovern here, especially as he comes from Honduras, a country that the Congressman has been working for over 4 years. Please join us.
Well, thank you, Kerry. And let me just say, and I think I speak for everybody in this room, and we say thank you to you for being this incredible force for human rights who never gives up, who is always persistent, and who gets results. I try never to miss the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Awards for a couple of reasons. One is growing up, my first political memories were Robert Kennedy. And the first and only time I ever saw my dad, who's no longer with us, shed a tear was the night that Robert Kennedy was assassinated. Because my father thought that the hope and promise of this nation was vanishing before his eyes. And so this organization and its commitment to human rights keeps alive the spirit and the idealism of Robert Kennedy. I co-chair the Human Rights Commission in the House of Representatives, and I believe that if the United States of America stands for anything, we need to stand out loud and foursquare for human rights. We don't always live up to that. But this organization and the people that are honored remind us that we need to do better. You know, I'm particularly thrilled to be here honoring Westley, who is not only an advocate for LGBTQ plus rights, but also for the rights of immigrants. And let me say, I love our president, not so much in love with what he just did in terms of limiting people from applying for asylum in this country. I think that goes against our values. But nonetheless, during Pride Month, it is so wonderful to have you here today. And you're going to hear in a little while from my colleague, Jimmy Raskin, who himself is a force of nature, a conscience in our Congress. And I'm just honored to be here, and I am grateful to all of you for being here. And thank you so much, Kerry.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Welcome to the Kennedy Caucus Room. This room served as the stage for major investigations, including into the Titanic, Pearl Harbor, Watergate, and the Bork hearings. But for the Kennedy family, it has a much more personal history. This is where then Senator John F. Kennedy announced his candidacy for president in 1960. And my father announced his own presidential bid here in 1968. saying, I have such strong feelings about what must be done, and I feel obligated to do all that I can. I cannot stand aside. Today, we're making history again by honoring a leader who cannot stand aside. Westley, our 2024 laureate, has devoted her life to not one but two causes we're passionate about here at Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights: non-discrimination for transgender individuals and humane immigration reform. We are creating a more just and peaceful world that my father envisioned. Please know that all of us at RFK Human Rights proudly stand alongside you in your fight for human dignity. We're so honored to have you and your family, your mother. Where's your mom? Here she is, and your family to celebrate with us. I also want to, yes, yay, another round of applause. I also want to acknowledge a few special guests joining us here today. Our 2005 Human Rights Award laureate, Stephen Bradbury, Congressman Troy Carter, Congressman Jim McGovern, and we just acknowledged our board and leadership council members, Tonio Burgos, Peter Edelman, Susan Livingston, and her husband Henry, Sherry Layton, James Pinto and his wife Dale, Michelle Barma, and George Friedenberg. Thank you. It takes a village to pull us together. And the mayor of that village is Ezzy Cheekwear. Where's Ezzy? When she is in the back. Thank you, Ezzy. We're doing full organizing us all. And I'd like to ask our Director of Domestic Advocacy and Litigation, Anthony Enriquez, to stand and be recognized. Anthony. Anthony and his team are winning cases that change laws and policies on immigration every single day. We're so proud of you and grateful to you and your full team. And our team will continue to partner with Honoree in the days to come, days and weeks and years to come. And also, would all the members of the RFK Human Rights staff please stand and be recognized? Thank you. These states are the endless poem. Here is not merely a nation, but a teeming nation of nations. Whitman might have said a nation of immigrants. What does it mean to be a nation of immigrants? My uncle, President Kennedy, wrote about the shared identity of America when he described us as, quote, a nation of people with a fresh memory of old traditions, who dared to explore new frontiers, people eager to build lives for themselves in a spacious society that did not restrict their freedom of choice and action, unquote. That vision, that faith, that determination, that bravery, the very fact that we are a nation of immigrants has formed the heart of our self-image, made us strong, and made us a leader among nations. But this vision of America is not shared by all. Fear, hatred, and distrust are played upon by cynical leaders to seed division and garner votes. Speaking to the House Judiciary Committee in 1964, my father, then Attorney General, called our nation's immigration system, quote, inconsistent with our principles and out of step with our history, unquote. He hoped and worked for better. On this day, 58 years ago, in apartheid-ruled South Africa, he spoke to a group of students in what has become known as the Ripple of Hope speech. He reminded the crowd that we must recognize the full human equality of all our people before God, before the law, before the councils of government. We must do this, not because it is economically advantageous, although it is, not because the laws of God command it, although they do, not because people in other lands wish it so. We must do it for the single and fundamental reason that it is the right thing to do, unquote. And yet today, our polarized climate has caused us to forget those values. Our immigration system today is clearly broken, rife with cruelty and inhumane treatment for those who cross our borders. When Daddy spoke those words, we detained 30 immigrants a day. 30. Today, 35,000 are in detention every day, in cages instead of free. A soon-to-be-published multi-year investigation conducted by Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights found detention at ICE facilities effectively torments and terrifies undocumented immigrants and their families into self-deporting. Meanwhile, private corporations make profits from running ICE detention centers where the degradation and mistreatment of detained people is the norm. With money poured over the transom, those same companies lobby the government to expand the detention system rather than address the causes. My father believed we should govern through the politics of compassion. And Honoree and her colleagues live out those principles in every part of their activism. We are truly blessed to have all of you here to pay tribute to a woman who answered a call to activism when she found herself imprisoned in a Louisiana ICE detention facility. Guards attempted to force Honoree to sign paperwork indicating that she was volunteering for solitary confinement. Just think about that. Volunteering for solitary confinement. Volunteering for PTSD. Volunteering for what the United Nations deems torture. But Honoree knew her rights. She demanded better, not only for herself, but for others. And from there, a growing career of advocacy was born. We're so proud to be working with you. And we'll hear from Honoree in just a few minutes. But now it's my honor to introduce to you our keynote speaker. Congressman Jamie Raskin is an attorney and law professor who represented Maryland's 8th congressional district since 2017. Prior to that, he served in the Maryland State Senate for a decade and was a constitutional law professor at American University, Washington College of Law, where he co-founded and directed the LLM program on law and government. Following the January 5th insurrection, January 6th insurrection, Congressman Raskin became the lead prosecutor for the Trump impeachment. On a personal note, Jamie and I studied for the bar exam together, attached at the hip for 6 long weeks, doing nothing but quizzing each other on Belgrade and taking breaks to play pinball. I definitely beat him at pinball, but not much else. Congressman, thank you for being here with us today.
So what a great honor it is to be with the RFK Human Rights family on this great occasion, and to be with you, Westley, and Kerry Kennedy, as she just suggested, is my beloved friend from 2 centuries, more than 5 decades. We've been friends together. And how do I look so old and you look so young, Carrie? I don't know. I was down in Charlottesville recently, and I visited Monticello, and I was flipping through some Jefferson diaries, and in one diary, there was a line where he said, "The older I get, the more I realize that the ones I love the most are the ones I love the first." And I thought about you, Carrie Kennedy, since you've been my friend for so long, from back in the days when we were in school. So thank you for this opportunity to give the keynote speech for the next 2 hours and 45 minutes. The RFK Human Rights Organization is a nonpartisan, nonprofit group. So even though I come to you as a true blue, dyed-in-the-wool Kennedy Democrat, I don't want to compromise anybody's 501c3 status today. So I wanted to begin on a bipartisan note by invoking our last great Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, who spoke of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And this has been the beautiful, tantalizing dream of America, but we, of course, didn't begin that way. We began as a slave republic of white male property owners over the age of 21. But it's been through successive waves of social and political struggle that we've come much closer to reaching Abraham Lincoln's beautiful and tantalizing and elusive ideal. And America's inspiring and agonizing quest to become a perfect union has infused, and it has been infused by struggles for freedom and democracy and human rights all over the world. The idea of human rights belonging to each and every person is the motive force in the progress of our democracy, but it is also the life instinct of human civilization. Our Declaration of Independence proclaimed the essential political core of the human rights philosophy, the equality of all people, consent of the governed as the basic principle of government, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for all. Corresponding ideal of one person, one vote, a slogan hard won in the sweltering heat of Mississippi in the 1960s with Bob Moses and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the martyrs, Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, has become not only what the great organizer, mathematician, philosopher Bob Moses called the radical equation of modern political democracy, but I would argue it has become the basic axiom of human rights all over the world, the central ideal of human civilization. Every person, every voice, every life matters, every vote matters, and every vote must count equally. It is an idea extremely simple to understand, so simple kids understand it intuitively, and sometimes better even than adults. But it's breathtaking in its implications and in the complexity and in the difficulty of its translation into a world still marked by so much tyranny, cruelty, scapegoating, and injustice. To make the ideals of human rights come alive in a world where freedom and democracy are still hunted by autocrats in Moscow and kleptocrats in Malaga, and theocrats in MAGA, and plutocrats everywhere, requires activists who will stand strong on basic moral principles and leaders who will engage others in political action with them towards the practical goals of democratic expansion and reconstruction, policy reform, and recognition of the ineradicable principle of human rights for all. Robert F. Kennedy was one such leader, of course, a visionary champion of human rights for everyone, a youngest child born with a youngest child's fierce devotion to justice and fairness, and a fearless liberal, both loving and compassionate beyond measure, and tough as nails in his fearless confrontational approach to the bullies of the world. 58 years ago today, on June 6th, 1966, Senator Robert F. Kennedy gave his famous Ripple of Hope speech, as Kerry said. He was in Cape Town, South Africa. He traveled to apartheid South Africa, not because President Johnson wanted him to go there. He didn't want him to go there. And not because the apartheid South government was going to welcome him there. They didn't. They tried to deny him a visa for more than 6 months before he was able to go. He went to South Africa because he was invited by the young people of South Africa who desperately wanted to hear his message of democracy and freedom and global solidarity for human rights and hope for humanity and peace for everyone. And he gave a speech that would inspire not only the anti-apartheid activists fighting the apartheid regime, but all of humanity. Every word and every line of his speech affirmed democracy and freedom and the unalterable equality of each and every person on earth. And he called for resistance and opposition to 4 essential enemies of social justice: futility, expediency, timidity, and complacency. In the speech, Kerry's dad stated that, quote, "The essential humanity of man can be protected and preserved only where the government must answer not just to the wealthy, not just to those of a particular religion, not just to those of a particular race, but to all of the people." We are here today to honor and uplift the work of another exemplary patriot, someone who embodies that brazen Kennedy spirit of devotion to the dignity and soaring potential of every human being, even those who are most downtrodden and vulnerable to the forces of chaos and hatred and fascism that are always bearing down on humanity. Today's Human Rights Award, Westley, has put everything on the line to defend the rights and lift the voices of people who are literally among the most targeted, scapegoated, and reviled minority on earth, people who are the focus of the wrath unleashed by all the dictators and the despots of the earth. Ari Westley empowers undocumented LGBTQ young people in search of freedom and citizenship in a safe place on our planet. Her determination, even to live through her own struggles and to be present here today as an undocumented transgender Honduran woman, demonstrates a kind of existential courage and activism that is very hard for the rest of us to understand. Her calling and her work seem otherworldly, but it's important not to set her apart from the rest of us, because that makes it way too easy for the rest of us to imagine that the risks that she takes and the political mobility she embodies are somehow unavailable and unreachable to us. They most certainly are not. As Dr. King said, all of us can be great because all of us can serve. I know a story about Kerry's father. I don't know whether it's true, but my dad used to tell it to me when I was growing up. He was a huge admirer of Robert F. Kennedy. He worked for President Kennedy in the White House, but he told it to me, and so I choose to believe it until some Kennedy biographer comes along to tell me it didn't happen. But anyway, it took place here in the Senate when Robert F. Kennedy was not yet a senator, but he worked on the staff of one of the committees that was doing an investigation into racketeering, and they had called Jimmy Hoffa, who was a union leader, but he was kind of mobbed up. And in the story, Robert Kennedy, who was counsel to the committee, leaned into his microphone and said, "Mr. Hoffa, as the president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters and the Secretary General and Treasurer of the Teamsters International Mid-Atlantic Pension Fund, a man of your great office and power is capable of doing both very great good and very great evil." And Hoffa leaned into his microphone and he said, "I intend to live up to both of my responsibilities." And I always like that story because it tells us you've got to choose between which side you're going to be on in this life. And Bobby Kennedy clearly knew which side he was going to be on. All of us get to choose. All of us must choose. And as Ari Westley and Kerry Kennedy show us fighting for democracy and for freedom, for the radical equation of equal rights for all is a good way to live. It's a great way to live. It may be the best way to live. It puts you in very special company. E.M. Forster said, I believe in aristocracy, if that's the right word, and if a Democrat may use it, not an aristocracy of power based upon rank and influence, but an aristocracy of the sensitive and the just, the considerate and the plucky. Its members are to be found in all nations, in all classes, and all through the ages. And there's a secret understanding between them when they meet. They represent the true human tradition, the one permanent victory of our race over cruelty and chaos. Thousands of them perish in obscurity. A few become great names. They are sensitive for others as well as for themselves. They are considerate without being fussy. Their pluck is not swankiness, but is the power to endure. And they can fight for good, and they can take a joke. This is the aristocracy of people who fight for freedom and democracy and human rights. And while Westley is spending her life demanding recognition for people who the dictators and the strongmen would simply trample and disparage, while she wants the chimes of freedom to ring for the refugees and the outcasts and the rebels and the luckless and the abandoned, the dictators and the strongmen are fighting for a world filled with fascism and authoritarianism, repression, violence, and war. And so we're in the fight of our lives today. But it is a fight that we can win. And I'm going to leave you with the words of two great patriots of democracy and freedom from our country. One was born about an hour away from here, Frederick Douglass, and he was born on the Wye River plantation into slavery. And he escaped from slavery to become a great freedom fighter and champion of the Union through the Civil War and Reconstruction. And Douglass said, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. And the struggle may be more, it may be physical, it may be more than physical, but there must be struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. There's a message to you from the people of Maryland. And I'll leave you finally with the words of the great Tom Paine, who came over to America in 1774, 2 years before the American Revolution. He wrote the pamphlet, the incendiary pamphlet that would become the organizing document of the American Revolution, Common Sense, by which he meant the sense we have, even if you don't get to go to the Princeton Theological Seminary, but the sense we have in common if we're willing to speak together and listen to each other and reason together. Common sense. And 1776 was a tough year, and half the people are running around saying, this won't work. You can't really have a revolution against the kings and the queens and the emperors and the czars and the duchesses and the union of church and state. Because for all of human history, people had lived under the dictators, and the Americans were trying something different with democratic self-government and freedom. But the other half of the people fight for an experiment in democratic self-government and liberty for all. And Paine wanted to write a pamphlet in that year to give people hope and courage at a time when nobody knew which way things were going to go. And would it be a retreat into the darkness of prior centuries, or would people get to continue to move forward to a time when there really would be human rights for everyone? So he wrote this little pamphlet called The American Crisis, and I'm going to just quote a little passage for you. I'll update the language a bit pursuant to instructions from Nancy Pelosi, who said Tom Paine was a feminist, and that he was, and he wouldn't mind us not offending modern sensibilities. And he was fighting for women's right to vote back in the 18th century, and he was an abolitionist too. But anyway, Tom Paine wrote this pamphlet called The American Crisis, and in it he said, these are the times that try men and women's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink at this moment from the service of their cause in their country. But everyone that stands with us now will win the love and the favor and the affection of every man and every woman for all time. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, but we have this saving consolation. The more difficult the struggle, the more glorious in the end will be our victory. So let's make that victory ours, RFK Human Rights Center. Thank you, Kerry Kennedy, and thank you, Arlen Westley.
Doesn't that make you want to go to dance school? And have Jamie be your teacher. You're so wonderful. Thank you, Congressman. The United States has the most notorious reputation of maintaining the world's largest immigrant incarceration regime. Instead of providing protection, the U.S. government detains people for months and sometimes years in unthinkable conditions where they're subject to rampant human rights and civil rights violations. Louisiana is strategically positioned as a hub for immigrant detention. Here, immigrants are detained at lower costs in areas which are shielded from public scrutiny. Those detained in the state's 9 ICE jails are shut off from legal resources. Those who do not speak English are regularly denied access to basic information that explains their rights, including how to file complaints about abusive treatment. Rights officials also use sexual harassment, abuse, and violence to humiliate detained immigrants, to break them, and to silence them. This is pervasive anti-LGBTQ violence, particularly against transgender people detained by ICE. If a transgender person complains of abuse, ICE oftentimes places them in solitary confinement, rather than intervening to stop the abuse that's causing the complaint. This practice of punishing transgender detainees for reporting mistreatment leads to chronic underreporting of abuse. Honoree Westley was one of those people. As a Honduran transgender woman, she escaped the brutal anti-LGBTQ climate that has killed more than 400 LGBTQ people in her birth country over the last 15 years alone. Our lawyers at RFK Human Rights, led by Angelita Bayans, won the first case in the history of Latin America holding the government accountable for the assassination of an LGBTQ person. Angelita, please stand. Fighting for international justice in the case of Vicky Hernandez, we at RFK Human Rights know firsthand that Honduras has the world's largest, highest rate of murder of transgender and other gender diverse people. Honoree arrived from Honduras in the U.S. in pursuit of safety, but didn't receive the help and protection she should have been legally assured. She was detained at the Central Louisiana ICE Processing Center. After seeking health care, she was placed in solitary confinement and was denied vital hormonal therapy just because she asked for her health care to be respected. She courageously stood up for herself in those abhorrent conditions, beginning her career in activism and social justice, combining LGBTQ, youth, and immigration advocacy. At BreakOUT, Honoree expands Latinx LGBTQ participation in youth organizations, healing justice, and leadership development programs. At the Southeast Dignity Not Detention Coalition, Honoree is a leading voice in their efforts to shut down ICE detention centers in Louisiana. At Home is Here, Honoree regularly drives 4 hours to visit the same detention center where she was held and provides people held there with Know Your Rights information and offers newly released people with access to wraparound support services. She helped plan the nation's foremost political leadership and skill building conference for the LGBTQ community. We are so proud to join you in this work. Honoree, please come forward.
I need you to bear with me here. It is a hard moment for me. It's so much emotions to be at this podium as I'm sitting in the United States Senate. I wish that I would be here with so many of my community and celebrating not only the honor in my life and the honor in my work, but also I wish that I was here with the great news of my community being free. As I'm saying here, I was a trans woman living day by day, original from San Pedro Sula, Honduras. I had to come to the United States to reunite with my mother. And because as a trans woman, I cannot live in Honduras because my community getting killed and getting oppressed in Honduras. And not only the trans community, but the entire Honduran community as well in Central America. So to begin, I want to mention that I would like to have a moment of silence for Vicky Hernandez, the trans woman who got killed in Honduras, Roxana Hernandez, who have lost her in his immigration detention center, Johanna Medina, and Ernesto Rocha, who was recently passed away in Gina Correctional Center, is now in Central Louisiana Correctional Center. It is iconic that they honoring today in our nation Senate. We celebrated Pride, while 2 days ago, the President Biden passed the order of executive order and that's a 24-hour after the administration announced that we will be expanding the daily detention centers together with a human prosecution of those desperately seeking refugees and our southern border. When we know they can take care of people inside, we have been witnesses. Not only going to the detention center to see people at least 3 times a month. But I've witnessed myself being there. It's a 17 years old trans woman being there first. And then recently, 2 years ago, being there, like they was forcing me to sign paperwork. They was thinking about that I was not aware about my rights. But this time again, it changed because I was building my leadership along with so many people that I met to my journey and who teach me how to fight for myself and for my community. So this time I have the tools to protect myself and to let them know that there is that was not right. And after being here in isolation cells, I have the capacity now to be on the other side and to see my people in those detention centers. The work that I do is a labor of love for my entire community. And so many things that I cannot be allowed to be in Washington. I will not stop this struggle with and for my intersectional community until this administration fulfills promise the end of federal contract with private prisons. Non-profit of suffering, destroying our health and healing was a premature in the process. I want to call the government because I don't know how many lives we have to lose in detention center. My people in my community need protections. We don't want to come to the United States because we want to come and here. We come to seek a better future because we cannot live in our countries. Because for one way or other, our community is suffering on multiple countries, and we need to come here. Make America great.
And we do work hard for this opportunity to build ourselves with opportunities that have been denied. There's not access to healthcare, there's not access to housing, to education. So how they want us to do better when they're oppressing us? I want to ask every trans person, there is somebody interested. Those my trans sisters that I would like them to stay enough. I want you to see their faces because they are the one who are actually fighting along with me in multiple states. We're going to to protect our community. We're going to protect our community. We're going to keep fighting for our freedom, for our liberation. But we cannot be free. Community as well. So we must fight and continue to fight. And I want to thank all my beautiful sisters in here because they're amazing women, been doing amazing work. And I'm so proud to be a part of the Latinx trans community. And lastly, I just want to say that I can celebrate Pride while my community is being oppressed. But it's not a moment to celebrate Pride. I don't need the government to highlight flags all around the country. While my sisters don't get access to jobs, education, when we've been put in jail, it can be criminal prisons, detention centers, immigration detention centers, because we need to survive. We don't have another choice to continue to thrive and fighting for life. I want to thank you, the RFK team, that made this possible, and especially I want to thank Kerry Kennedy to put their eyes on me to believe on my leadership. I will continue doing my work as best as I can, and I promise that I will carry the legacy in my heart and my soul, and actually making sure I proudly represented is RFK Human Rights Award. Thank you.
So beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Ellie. Congressman McGovern, Congressman Westley, friends and family, to close today's ceremony, I just want to reflect on the words of the great poet and Lazarus, which are etched in the Statue of Liberty. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquerors astride with to late. Here, at our sea-washed sunset gate, shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and the name mother of exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities bring. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. We pray for America to be that refuge once again. Thank you all for joining us today.